Okay. Okay. We should be live and ready to go. Just got the notification. Let's see. Just got the notification. Yes, we are. Okay. A lot has happened in the past week. Quite a bit of news has come out, such as things like Liberal MPs abandoning Trudeau. Roughly 4 Liberal MPs have abandoned ship, and I believe were said to be either just leaving or going into retirement. Not 100% sure on that, would have to double check, but I do know that about 4 Liberal MPs have abandoned the Trudeau government. On top of all of this, they're still talking about the SDTC, the documents that Trudeau has failed to produce under a lawful order. We're still, almost a month now this has gone on, and they still are talking about this issue. It makes me question our government even further as this continues. It's like I said, almost been a month, and they're still talking about the failure to produce documents pertaining to the SDTC, the probably more than $400 million of taxpayer money that was gifted to Trudeau's buddies and liberal businesses and liberal business owners, aka probably people who just back Trudeau. On top of that, the terrorist organization, I can't remember what they're called. It kind of sounds like Saruman or Sauduman or Saudi, whatever they're called. The people who were chanting "Death to Canada" while burning the Canadian flag have now been listed an active terrorist organization. We have talked about that and did talk about that in one of the past streams I did. One of them being Trudeau testifying on foreign interference. That was a very long live stream that they did there on the CPAC site. Roughly 3 hours or so of Trudeau just straight up testifying. And then Trudeau did get confronted and do a little press conference by reporters, and he pretty much explained everything that was going on. But, I take pretty much every single one of his words with a grain of salt. Trudeau likes to be a good old two-faced liar. And it shows, and it continues to show when almost a month later, we're still talking about the SDTC, the $400 million slush fund. I can't, excuse my language, but I can't fucking believe our government right now and how they are functioning. This is over $400 million of taxpayer money that has vanished and we will most likely never see again. On top of all of this, like I said, the foreign interference, India or something of the Indian government coming in and assassinating somebody or whatever the case was there. That was a whole thing going on as well. We literally have some sort of group, some sort of organization that India is not for and they are highly against. Our connections, our relations with Canada and India have now pretty much fallen through. It is very rough on that end. What used to be a very strong international connection, not a democracy, but a connection for trade and deals and all of that has fallen through due to Trudeau and what he has allowed to happen on our soil. Right now, we are watching House of Commons proceedings. We are still talking about the SDTC. We will be getting into question period in roughly an hour. I started the stream extremely early to try and talk about and get as much information out as possible early here. So, while I look into more of what's happening, let's get into the House of Commons proceedings.
Number 4, Yorkton Melville.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to speak today to the SDTC scandal. This organization had a key mandate. It's federally funded, nonprofit, that's approved and was to disperse over $100 million in funds annually to clean technology companies. Sustainable Development Technology Canada, or SDTC, was established in 2001 by the Government of Canada through the Canada Foundation for Sustainable Development Technology Act to fund the development and demonstration of new technologies that promote sustainable development. It was to be an arm's length, not-for-profit organization that was created to support projects that develop and demonstrate new technologies that address issues related to climate change, air quality, clean water, and clean soil. Well, clearly it must have functioned quite well up until around 2017, 2018, when government changed hands and it fell under the responsibility of our Liberal government. Actually, the Liberal government. I have trouble saying our because I don't feel it's representing me or my right.
They have no confidence in him anymore. His own party is calling for him to resign. Multiple MPs have left the Liberal Party. They have resigned themselves. They have pretty much gone into retirement. The ship is sinking. We have a party that is pretty much the Titanic. It's the Titanic. It's hit the iceberg, and we are sinking. Like, as much as that sounds like a joke, it's really not. It's pretty sad. This is what our government... They're not even all on the same page. They sit there in the House of Commons, arguing points for Canadians, saying that they're for Canadians, but they have zero confidence in their own leader. Multiple MPs leaving. Backbenchers calling on Trudeau to resign. This is what's happening right now.
But in June 2019, Minister Baines decided to proceed with the appointment of Ms. Verschuren, despite repeated warnings expressed at his office. So the new chair went on to create an environment where conflict of interests are tolerated and managed by board members. Whoa. Board members go on to award SDTC funding to companies in which board members hold stock or positions within the company that are receiving the funding. Minister Baines goes on to appoint two other controversial board members who engaged in unethical behavior in breach of the Conflict of Interest Act by approving funding.
Here's another one. Second Liberal MP goes public with call for Justin Trudeau to resign. People have had enough. These are all coming out within the past 5 days to a week. A lot is happening in the Liberal government right now. A lot of people, like I said, are abandoning ship.
But they didn't intervene. January 2021, the minister, I'm forgetting his riding, sorry, the new minister becomes the new Minister of Industry, replacing Navdeep Baines after a decision to not run for re-election. Mr. Baines, I guess, decided that would be a wise decision on his part. In November 2022, whistleblowers raised internal concerns with the Auditor General about unethical practices that were taking place. Privy Council is briefed by the whistleblowers about the allegations shortly after and commissioned two independent reports. In September 2023, the whistleblowers take the allegations public, and the minister agrees, finally, to suspend SDTC funding. Things are a mess. November 2023, the Auditor General announces an audit. And in June of 2024, the Auditor General report is released, finding severe government failures. You know, the Auditor General and Ethics Commissioner initiated these separate investigations after whistleblowers came forward with allegations of financial mismanagement of the fund, And, you know, I have to say, it's an amazing thing when people are willing to put their reputation, their lives, their futures on the line because they see something like this taking place within our government. And so I applaud them for making that decision and to move forward with that. And I'm just going to take a moment here to share some of the quotes of the whistleblower that were shared as committee testimony. And I'm quoting, "I think the Auditor General's investigation was more of a cursory review. I don't think the goal and mandate of the Auditor General's office is to actually look into criminality. I'm not surprised by the fact that they haven't found anything criminal because they're not looking at intent. If their investigation was focused on intent, of course they would find the criminality."
Well, okay, voting Conservative doesn't fix anything. That might be true to some extent, but who else do we really have? We just had 10 years of Trudeau, pretty much 10 years of Trudeau, and the country has been more or less annihilated. If you vote Conservative, yes, it's just going to be a flip-flop back and forth, possibly another however many years of the Harper government returning. If you vote NDP, that will be the literal destruction of our country as you know it. Their policies are terrible, and Jagmeet is not suited to be a leader. We've seen him lash out multiple times. He's lashed out at Canadians. He's lashed out at Pierre. He cannot control himself and keep his cool. Imagine him going to make international deals or speak with an international leader, and he lashes out like that. He is not somebody that is trustworthy. And if the Bloc gets into power, well, the Bloc will probably just leave. They'll probably take Quebec and leave. Or they'll try and change all of Canada into a Quebec-like state or however. At this current point in time, the only people we really can vote for are Conservative if you do want the country to possibly return to how it was. Not saying it's going to be 100%, and it really depends on if Pierre keeps a lot of his promises. He sings a very sweet song, that man. I tell you, he can say words, and he says a lot of great words, but it's the actions that truly matter, right? And 10 years of Trudeau just has not been it. It has not been it. Record high immigration, which is causing a housing crisis, which is causing a homeless crisis as well. People cannot afford houses or food. It's become pretty brutal. They bring in all of these people, and then they forget about them months later, and they leave them to asylums, or they leave them to wherever to be taken in and be taken care of. And they just keep doing it over and over again. We can't house the people that are already here. We keep bringing people in that we can't house. It's going to add to this homeless crisis. It adds to the food bank issues. It adds to a lot of different things when you can't sustain the people that are living here and you just try to keep bringing everybody else in. We just can't afford it. We can't sustain it as a country.
Cannot get off of its need for taxing Canadians with a carbon tax because of the work that needs to be done to make sure that our country and our world is sustainable for the next generations. And in the meantime, they are taking those exact dollars set aside for green technologies and improvements and spending them by giving them quietly to companies that have ulterior motives with that money and no intention of using it for its supposed environmental process. So this alone, when you have Canadians who are paying those carbon taxes, not getting back what they have put into it, and facing higher costs for fuel, for food, and now for their housing, for everything because of the added down the line cost of that carbon tax, it just, well, we know where it's leading Canadians. And we know how
desperate. Was that a dog barking? Did somebody bring a dog into the House of Commons?
Of course, will come when the Conservative Party of Canada has the incredible honor to form government soon. But the second part, and abusing countless employees over this last year. You know, this is a government that talks about how much they appreciate the people behind the scenes, what a high quality of people they are that serve the government. And here we have an individual talking about how they abuse countless employees. This does not speak to a government that is a servant, but rather a master, determining that what they want will happen my way or the highway, and who's in the way doesn't matter. They're willing to put them under the bus. So there are so many violations here of Canadians' trust. And my colleague from Saskatoon West spoke of many, many other issues that this government has been part of, with all the way back to the ad scam, up to the We challenge, the ad scam. I mean,
Well, one thing I've noticed the Liberal government likes to do, they've caused record high inflation, record high food prices, basically record high everything across the board. And then when they are able to lower it about a percentage or two, they sit there and pat themselves on the back. But at the end of the day, you guys have caused this record high inflation. You've caused all these issues. You're sitting there and doing the bare minimum to try to return it to normal. And then when you do, like I said, the bare minimum, they sit there and they pat themselves on the back and say, well, look what we're doing for Canadians. We're for Canadians. Well, if you were for Canadians, we wouldn't be in this situation we're currently in, where we have active, known terrorist organizations running around our country, and you have numerous other things going on. Just pure insanity. It's pure insanity whenever the Liberal government talks.
and accountability to an advisory board. Well, I was somewhat concerned about this. I thought, well, what is this advisory board? I had not heard a lot about this approach. And so I asked the individual who had spoken from West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, sea to sky country, about this board and what it was supposed to look like, how it would function, how many people would be on it, where they'd come from, what would their qualifications and credentials be, and what would their mandate be, and for how, all of these types of questions, because we were at the beginning of discussing the potential of this bill and wanting to give good feedback on what we thought was appropriate or not. Well, he stood up and immediately was so pleased to say that that board had already been chosen. Already chosen. We were in the first hours of debate, and the deal was done. So this gives just a bit of an example of how this government really does not care about the elected people representing this country and how they are to function within the responsibilities of this Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have left? 7 minutes. Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. So, as I said, there are so many violations here that have been discussed throughout the day, in addition to the Green Slush Fund, that you can't but help notice how much Canadians trust in this particular NDP Liberal coalition and in government in general. So many of our institutions is waning. They're very discouraged because they see all of these ethical violations that have taken place over and over again on that side of the floor, and yet there is no sense of having to apologize or to change their behavior on behalf of Canadians. And then abusing employees is something that, to enable them to give funds to those that should not receive those funds. So in other words, I'm sorry, I can't help but think it's a very good thing that we have made the decision to request that these papers get to where they should be and get to the RCMP so that that criminality can be explored. And then there's the question of financial management. And what do they say? You can give benefit of the doubt the first time when you hear, an error. And I believe that the new minister even said, as soon as we heard, we acted. Well, 2 years later, I'm sorry, it was the result of whistleblowers that we are here dealing with this today. So, are they not capable to run this government in a respectful, transparent way that makes proper use of Canadian tax dollars? So are they not capable, or are they just indifferent? Here they are in places of power and not truly giving proper oversight to the departments that they are responsible for. So that speaks to, I think, not only indifference, but the potential for that incapability to do their job, to ensure that their departments are being run properly. But then there's the third thing, and I think this is the one that is now so obvious to Canadians, and that is a very self-serving agenda, that it's not about Canadians, it's not about serving Canadians, but it's about serving themselves and their friends and focused on political gain at all costs rather than to do the right thing for Canadians. So the Auditor General's report showed that over $400 million have been awarded to projects that either shouldn't have been eligible or were awarded to projects in which the board members were conflicted during the 5-year audit period. This is so, you know what, a preschooler could understand the importance of doing this properly and would be able to see very clearly where this government, if they knew these are the things that are expected in these roles, they would see very clearly that this did not match that. I just want to follow up that part about speaking about an indifference and self-serving with a quote that I've used before, and it speaks to the very essence of what we're hearing in this circumstance and so many other conflicts by this government. And it's hard not to feel disappointed in your government when every day there's a new scandal. And these are the words of this Prime Minister as a member of Papineau when he was in the opposition. And I know we've heard a lot, well, you know, you can't blame us because you did the same thing. Well, not true. Not true, Mr. Speaker. But his words, we'll get into that, but his words absolutely ring true today. After 9 years of scandal, corruption, liberal entitlement, the business of the House has been put on hold to discuss this scandal of monumental proportions and to request and demand what should be done, rightfully so, by this government. Simply release those documents as they have been required to do by this place, by the vote of the membership of this House who have the right to demand those documents be presented, not presented redacted, not presented in piecemeal, but be presented as required. And as the Speaker of the House indicated, that they were not doing that, and those documents need to be shared and they need to be provided to the RCMP so that the proper work can be done that respects Canadians.
The PPC came out really strong during, like, what was it, 2020 or 2019 or whatever. They came out swinging, and they came out pretty hard, and then they just kind of disappeared, and we haven't heard a single thing, or at least I haven't, since then. And I'm pretty sure Maxime lost in his own riding as well, so that's kind of rough if you can't even get your own riding to get along or on board with you.
Voting itself, absurd amounts of taxpayer dollars, and it is not arm's length from the government. The minister recommended board appointments, and ISED had senior department officials sitting in every meeting monitoring the activities of the board and do nothing about it. It is unbelievable that a senior department official would say nothing while witnessing how many millions of dollars were funded to companies in which board members held conflicts.
If you guys are new here, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button, and turn the notification bell on. I cover question period and House proceedings every single day they are active.
Time. 1 minute. Okay. Well, basically, it was the Prime Minister himself in 2016 saying how proud he was to be the Prime Minister, which means first servant of Canadians. But he also made the point of saying that Canada is now the first post-national state, which to me was a very serious comment that basically indicated he was not concerned about Canada and who it is. He wasn't concerned about its sovereignty, but it was a post-national state that he was prepared to run into the ground for his own ideological purposes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Really and truly, the Conservative reformers across the way need to read and better understand why it is Stephen Harper was the only Prime Minister in the history of Canada who was found in contempt. Why is that relevant? Think of the character of their current leader. Their current leader was the parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister back then, Mr. Speaker. And is there any, why wouldn't someone understand why that is not important to today? When you have the leader of the Conservative Party saying, I don't want to get the security clearance so I can get more information about the members of Parliament. I'll end with a quote, and maybe the member can provide her response to this quote. Wesley Wark, who has advised both Liberal and Conservative governments on national security issues, said the Tory leader is knowingly misleading the public by claiming he doesn't need the security clearance because his Chief of Staff has received briefings. The leader of the Conservative Party is playing games with Canadians. When's the game going to stop, and when will he get that security clearance?
Member for Yorkton Melville. Don't debate
The member across the floor is playing games. Bottom line. And here's the thing. Do you know who's in contempt of court? The NDP Liberal coalition. It's time to get those papers here and to the RCMP. Do your job.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? L'honorable.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Good morning, Mr. Speaker, or good afternoon, rather. Thank you for recognizing me. I'd like to thank my colleague. He did take up all this time in the House to say that the documents have to be remitted, and I'd like to tell him something that's not a scoop. We all agree with this, Mr. Speaker. So through you, I'd like to ask him, well, we all agree on this. We want to force the government to remit these documents. Could he tell me about when they'll be ready to vote on this? I think we could be ready today, tomorrow. We're ready, and the vote will go through. We're going to support them on this. Are we ready to vote on this?
The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
Hey, Frosty, you're allowed to believe whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you how to vote. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. You're allowed to freely speak in here and say whatever you please. I don't care. But at the end of the day, it is a little weird that you are here if that's what you truly believe all of this is. Just saying.
Member for Yorkton Melville for her comments. One of the things that struck me was the word self-serving. And there's one example comes to mind. There's many examples, but what comes to mind is one of the board members who received $250 million for her companies. And we have the Minister for Environment and Climate Change that actually was a lobbyist with them and has shares of the company and met with I believe, the PMO's office a dozen times before getting elected. So I just wonder if the member would be able to comment a bit more on that as far as almost the self-serving, incestuous to be relationship that they seem to have with these sort of the slush fund.
The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. He's really not right, because my whole thing at the end of the day is I don't really like the Conservatives, but I really, really don't fucking like the Liberals. And if the NDP or Bloc were to ever get into power, it would be the destruction of our country. So to sit here and say that I'm just some conservative propaganda piece or whatever the hell you want to call me, it's a little strange, especially when you're sitting in here in the live chat. But like I said, you're free to say or believe whatever you want. I don't care. It's freedom of speech. I don't care.
That are not appropriate to have the funds and aren't even doing anything specific to improve the environment. Something very important to me to...
Yeah, but for anything to actually get done in this country, you would have to vote for at least somebody who's going to get into power. And somebody like the PPC or NDP or Bloc, it's not really going to happen now, is it?
The Honourable Member for... Honourable Member. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I asked the question several times about what we could do to avoid these type of situations from repeating themselves. Conservatives don't seem to be interested in this. They've already looked at the same question about the refusal to...
Yeah, well, Trudeau's an idiot. I think we can all agree with that now, can't we?
guarantees us that the Liberals, the Conservatives rather, won't be doing the same things as in the few years if they form the government?
In Melville.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Listen, it was our government that created the first Federal Accountability Act. So can you imagine where we would be at today if we had not put the things in place that we have already done so? And the point being that those things apply as much to us when we form government as anyone who has that privilege and responsibility. So I am very proud of my leader who has...
And that's exactly what I'm getting at. What other option do we have, Frosty? You have failed to mention it. Because what, the Green Party's gonna get in and save trees? I don't know. What is your whole thing here?
responsibility, and we will continue to make sure that what happens...
Or are you like a communist or something? Because if that's the case, then I don't want to hear any of your commie fucking opinions.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Pretty straightforward question. For the last 3 weeks, the Conservatives have framed the situation as being solely a partisan issue from a Liberal insider that received, and I would agree, that received unfavorable treatment, self-dealings, and acted in a corrupt way. However, would the honourable member care to comment on the fact that the same person in question, Annette Verschuren, donated to the Conservative Party as recently as March 24th, 2022. So, you know, this is a situation where not only is it a Liberal insider, but it's a Conservative insider as well. Does the honourable member care to comment, or do they seem to have amnesia on that fact as well?
The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
Mr. Speaker, I don't care who gives money where. They don't have a right to break the law.
Questions and comments? The honourable Parliamentary Secretary, Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me make things simpler in terms of the question I have for the member opposite. I've had members from her ranks today say, tell us the names. Give us the 11 MPs dealing with foreign interference. The leader of the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker, if he was to get the security clearance, can actually go and get the names. But unlike the leader of the Bloc, the leader of the Green, the leader of the NDP, and obviously the Prime Minister, he has chosen to be blind on the issue. Can she justify why the leader of the Conservative Party feels it's appropriate to play games with Canadians on this important issue?
The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
The one playing games is the person across the floor.
And
She
comments?
she said that earlier. She's adding nothing to this.
See, I was so ready for Edmonton West.
I want to thank my colleague for her excellent talk. This government is rife with corruption. Or actually, for those at home wondering, this is one of 3 green-related scandals going on right now. Of course, there's the Green Slush Fund. There's one involving the Environment Department giving out millions in grants to massive corporations without any oversight or governance. And then also the Net Zero Accelerator, where they gave out $8 billion to wealthy foreign corporations that weren't eligible for the money. I wonder if my colleague could tell us what it says about this government that they have so many scandals going on, they have subsets of subsets of subsets of scandals.
The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
Thank you so much to my colleague for the question. Okay, I have 1 minute. Here's what I would say. Somebody needs to write a book, or at least document, maybe do a movie someday, I don't know. But the point being that this government is so, I don't think they have any item of business in this House that isn't somehow impacted by their choices to focus on self and those that support them rather than do what is best for Canadians. And I can hardly wait until we have the opportunity to change government.
Reprise du débat, continuing debate. The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
That was not a strong argument at all. That was quite pathetic, actually.
I don't mean to be preempting anybody in this place, but because I don't know if I'll be on my feet
she said go write a book or a movie? Like, what are we talking about here?
for 22nd. And it was 10 years ago tomorrow that myself and a handful of people who still remain in this place had the unfortunate scenario of being locked down in this House of Commons. I was in the reading room in the Conservative caucus with Prime Minister Stephen Harper when a gunman...
Yeah, this is live right now. This is the House of Commons proceedings that will lead into question period at roughly 2:10, 2:15.
About this, but I just wanted to say,
Eastern Standard
while I'm
Time.
on my feet, my continued condolences to the family of Patrice Vincent. The warrant officer was killed a few days earlier, to the family of Nathan Cirillo. And I just wanted to say thank you very much to the continued work of our Parliamentary Protective Services. It wasn't that way then. As a matter of fact, the current contingent was reorganized after that incident. But I wanted to throw out a thank you to J.J. Frankie, who was the security guard who was in our caucus room that day, and of course Constable Son, who actually took a bullet that day. And I want to thank all of the protective services that, as a hunter, Mr. Speaker, I knew exactly what I heard outside the doors of that caucus room. And I could say, I don't remember in 19 years, almost 19 years of doing this job, I don't remember every single day, but I remember that day. So now I'll move on, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak on a motion of privilege put forward by my Conservative colleague following the government's refusal to hand over all documents related to the Prime Minister's Green Slush Fund to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. In my 18+ years as a parliamentarian in this House, I've understood that breaches of privilege of parliamentarians is a serious matter. However, it seems that this current Liberal government does not share that same understanding. The Liberal government has ignored the will of Parliament and Canadians once again. But let's go back and summarize this latest act of corruption by the Liberal government with a quick review of the timeline. In late 2018, the former industry minister expressed concerns regarding the chair of Sustainable Development Technology Canada, given that he had been publicly criticizing government legislation at the time. The then minister's office requested that the chair stop criticizing his government's legislation. The minister at the time, the Prime Minister's office and Privy Council office were warned of the risks associated with their desire to replace the chair with the proposed candidate who was receiving Sustainable Development Technology Canada funding through one of their companies, which was a clear conflict of interest. In June 2019, the minister decided to proceed with the appointment of a conflicted chair, despite repeated warnings expressed to the minister's office. The new chair created an environment where conflict of interests are tolerated and managed by board members. Board members then went on to award Sustainable Development Technology Canada funding to companies in which they themselves hold stock or high-level positions within the companies that received the funding. 2 additional appointed and controversial board members engaged in unethical behavior in breach of the Conflict of Interest Act by approving funding. Yeah,
exactly. If Jagmeet becomes PM, then giraffes can fly. Yeah, exactly. Why was Jagmeet banned from India? Was he actually?
6 conflicts at the board, but did not.
Is it because of his insane policies?
In November of 2022, whistleblowers raised internal concerns with the Auditor General about unethical practices at Sustainable Development Technology Canada. The Privy Council was briefed by the whistleblowers about the allegations shortly after the Commission's 2 independent reports. In September of 2023, the whistleblowers take the allegations public, and the minister...
okay, right. I did read something about that. Okay, right. Yeah, that's not good. That's a whole lot of not good.
The General announces an audit of Sustainable Development Technology Canada. In June of 2024, the Auditor General report is released finding severe governance failures at Sustainable Development Technology Canada. And that brings us to where we are here today. On June 10th, this House adopted a motion calling for the production of various documents related to Sustainable Development Technology Canada to be turned over to the RCMP for review. It was passed by a majority of members in this House. In response to the motion adopted, departments either outright refused this House's order or redacted documents were turned over citing provisions of the Privacy Act or Access to Information Act in direct violation of the order that was voted on by a majority of members of this House. Nothing in that House order required redactions. The House enjoys the absolute, this House enjoys the absolute and unfettered power to order the production of documents that is not limited by any statute. These powers are rooted in the Constitution Act of 1867 and the Parliament of Canada Act. In response to the failure to produce documents, my colleague, the Conservative House Leader, raised a point of privilege, arguing that House privilege has been breached due to the failure to comply with the House's direct order.
Well, I don't know if he's banned from the U.S., but yeah, he's not fit to serve at all, and he's proven that over the past few months. But I don't know if he's banned from the U.S. I guess he's probably banned from India, based on his what is it, the Palestine or Palestinian, whatever the fuck they are, that group.
Office is to actually look into criminality. I'm not surprised by the fact that they haven't found anything criminal because they're not looking for intent. If their investigation was focused on intent, of course they would find the criminality. I'll go on with the quote from the whistleblower, Mr. Speaker. I know the federal government, like the minister, has continued saying that there was no criminal intent and nothing was found, but I think the committee would agree that they're not to be trusted on this situation. I would happily agree to whatever the findings are by the RCMP. I would say that I wouldn't trust that there isn't criminality unless the RCMP is given full authority to investigate. Full authority, which means they have to have all of the facts, not just the facts that the government chooses to release in direct contravention of an order passed by this House. So it is high time, Mr. Speaker, for the government to hand over the documents to the RCMP, for the RCMP themselves to determine the criminal activity in the Green Slush Fund scandal. The whistleblower continued by stating, I am confident that the Auditor General would confirm the financial mismanagement at Sustainable Development Technology Canada, and I remain equally confident that the RCMP will substantiate the criminal activities that occurred within the organization. The true failure of the situation stands at the feet of our current government, whose decision to protect wrongdoers and cover up their findings over the last 12 months is a serious indictment of how our democratic systems and institutions are being corrupted by political interference. It should never have taken 2 years for the issues to reach this point, and what should have been a straightforward process turned into a bureaucratic nightmare that allowed Sustainable Development Technology Canada to continue wasting millions of dollars and abusing countless employees over the last year. Conservatives know that the current government remains more concerned about their own insiders and friends and ministers than the issues that are facing ordinary, everyday Canadians. I couldn't have said it better myself when the whistleblower for this massive government overreach said, I think that the current government is more interested in protecting themselves and protecting the situation being a public nightmare, and they would rather protect wrongdoers and financial mismanagement than have to deal with a situation like this Sustainable Development Technology Canada and in the public sphere. It has become abundantly clear, Mr. Speaker, after 9 years that this NDP Liberal government are not worth the cost, not worth the crime, not worth the corruption, and the Green Slush Fund scandal is just another scandal on the heap pile of the festering corruption of 9 years of this government. My Conservative colleagues and I prioritize the concept of responsible government in Canada. The government must answer to members as the representatives of the people and must be held accountable to Canadians who are suffering from the failed policies.
To be honest with you, I would like to know what actions were even taken after the Air India incident, the attack, because it seems like we're kind of heading down that path even further, if you know what I'm trying to get at here. Got to be careful with what I say on YouTube, but it seems like we've gotten to a point where we just keep allowing these organizations to more or less do whatever the fuck they want, and I don't know, maybe they've gotten into our government at this point, and yeah, I just, if that was a while ago, that was a long time ago too, and it feels like not a lot has really happened to change or maybe prevent things like that from happening again. Like, I know 9/11 was a massive one for the States, right? But I don't know.
Constant attention and ongoing commitment by all of us throughout our mandate. This guide will serve as an important reference as we strive to provide an open and accountable government for all Canadians. Well, how has that turned out, Mr. Speaker? Broken promises, corruption, and scandal are now known by millions of Canadians as the core principles and tenets of this Liberal government and their Prime Minister, rather than their so-called open and accountable government document. You'll notice, Mr. Speaker, they never refer to it anymore. Mr. Speaker, you have ruled that the NDP Liberal government has violated a House order to turn over evidence to the police for a criminal investigation in this scandal. It is time for some accountability, and it is time to show Canadians where their tax dollars are really going. The Auditor General's findings reveal that Liberal appointees have paid $400 million to their own companies, involving not one, not two, not 10, not 50, not 100, but 186 conflicts of interest. Canada is struggling. This country feels broken under the leadership of this Prime Minister and his NDP Liberal government. Canadian families will spend $700 more this year at the grocery store, and food banks have seen a 50% rise in visits since 2021. 2 million Canadians a month visiting food banks. Life has never been less affordable, more expensive. At a time when Canadians are struggling with an impossible cost of living, the Liberal government continues to spend recklessly, funneling taxpayer dollars to their friends and their insiders. To summarize the facts and this serious breach of privilege, Sustainable Development Technology Canada was established in 2001 by the Government of Canada through the Canada Foundation for Sustainable Development Technology Act to fund the development and demonstration of new technologies that promote sustainable development. Sustainable Development Technology Canada is responsible for the administration of the SD Tech Fund in accordance with the guidelines for the funding agreement with Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. In 2019, the former industry minister began appointing conflicted executives to the board of Sustainable Development Technology Canada. The board appointed by this Liberal government began voting companies in which executives hold active conflicts of interest. The Auditor General and Ethics Commissioner initiated separate investigations after whistleblowers came forward with allegations of financial mismanagement of the fund. The Auditor General's investigation finds severe gaps in governance standards and uncovers that $400 million in Sustainable Development Technology Canada funding was awarded to projects in which board members, the ones making the decisions of the awards, were conflicted during the 5-year audit period. The government has opposed the opposition at every step of the way in getting these documents, trying to silence the will of parliamentarians in this House and avoid accountability to Canadians. The Liberals are trying to hide the $390 million that has gone to Liberal insiders under this program. They continue to oppose this production order for important documents to be turned over to the RCMP. The Prime Minister's personal department, the Privy Council Office, defied the order of the House to produce these documents and ordered departments to redact all sensitive information. The Prime Minister's office turned its back on Canadians by blacking out these documents, and Canadians want to know, what exactly is this government hiding?
Canadians want to know why we're still stuck on this exact same issue and nothing. Has anything been accomplished with this SDTC issue? It feels like it has been almost a month now of absolutely nothing but the exact same points being said from both sides. The Liberal government did hand over a few documents, but they were completely redacted. Nothing you could get from them. And now we're still here talking about the exact same thing we were talking about at the beginning of last month. With everything going on right now, you would think the government would just fucking get things moving. Like, what are we doing here? What is going on?
Minister started caring about it. The Auditor General found that Sustainable Development Technology Canada gave $58 million to 10 ineligible projects that on occasions couldn't demonstrate an environment of green technology. $58 million for projects, 10 projects that had nothing to do with the mandate of the organization. $334 million over 186 different cases to projects in which board members, 186 conflicts of interest, in which board members, just a handful of board members, managed to wind up in 186 conflicts of interest. Like, you can't make this stuff up. $58 million to projects without ensuring contribution agreement terms were met. So in other words, where there was matching funds expected, normally you would do due diligence and make sure before you released any taxpayers' funds that the matching funding would come, but there was no requirement for the matching funding to come, so we'll just send out another $60 million. Who cares? It's just another liberal rich day for liberal insiders. Even the Prime Minister's own government departments know that the Liberal government is not worth the corruption or the cost. A recording of a senior revealed the outright incompetence of this government, which gave $123 million worth of contracts inappropriately. The blame for this scandal lies clearly with the Prime Minister and his ministers of industry who did not sufficiently.
BC is pretty much just Northern California. Like, it's gotten pretty bad. It's not good.
Just today, you tabled a further update from the legal clerk on the responses to the June 10th production order concerning Sustainable Development Technology Canada. It would not come as a surprise to anyone in this place that these documents from the Departments of Finance, Industry, and the Treasury Board Secretariat were heavily redacted or had pages withheld in their entirety. Surprise, surprise, the Liberal government, even in the context of this debate, in this place, is withholding information from Canadian taxpayers. This privilege ruling and the actions of the NDP Liberal government has already paralyzed this Parliament and made it impossible to address the serious issues facing Canadians, such as doubling housing costs, food inflation, crime, and chaos. And I'll just remind the viewers at home, this is not the first time that we've actually been in this scenario. And Mr. Speaker, I hope you've got good legal counsel, because the precedence has already been set that in the event that this House is adjourned, you could be facing legal consequences, because the last Speaker tried to produce documents in the Winnipeg lab scandal, just another one of the scandals too numerous to mention, and the government was actually going to take the Speaker to court in order to cover up their accountability and their actions or lack thereof when it came to protecting Canada's sovereignty in the Winnipeg Labs scandal.
Oh, they're building a legacy, all right. The Trudeau legacy, it's something.
Mr. Speaker, the lengths that Conservatives will go to in order to hold the government to account and to make sure that taxpayers are adequately informed about where their hard-earned dollars are going, is that we will continue this debate until the result that Canadians.
If you guys are new here, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit the notification bell. I do cover question period whenever it is going on. Right now, we are still in the House of Commons proceedings, and question period should be coming up within the half hour. Very close, very soon.
It's time for this Prime Minister to take accountability, provide these documents outlining the conflicts of interest of this green slush fund. Only common sense Conservatives will end the corruption and get answers that Canadians rightfully deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question et commentaire. The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for his excellent speech. One of the issues I was talking about earlier is one of the various green scandals that this government is mired in is the net accelerator. The Auditor General noted $8 billion have been given away to companies, many of them that don't even qualify. But looking at it, one of the companies that received government funding is a company called Geely. They received $15 million in subsidies. Geely is a Chinese-owned EV company, which is now, of course, subject to a 100% tariff on their cars. So I wonder if the member could comment on the ridiculousness of using taxpayers' money to subsidize Chinese EVs at the same time hitting them with 100% tariffs to stop them from bringing their cars into Canada.
Well, member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if you ever wanted to see a rhetorical question, that one is it. But I think it speaks to the broader issue of the profligacy of this government that will spend money on anything it wants to put in the window to showcase, because this government is all about virtue signaling, it's all about messaging, it's all about appearances, it's all about optics. It is not about good governance, it is not about making responsible decisions, and we see now, finally, and Canadians see, after 9 years, what this government has been about the whole time. And, Mr. Speaker, the only way to find a path forward is to have these documents produced to this House and to the RCMP. And if that's not going to happen, then the people of Canada should have their say in an election to decide if they want to continue allowing this government to spend the way it spends, to commit the corruption that it commits, and let them have a say. And hopefully a Conservative government will follow, restoring some sense of accountability and good governance to this once proud country.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. L'honorable député de...
The honourable member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Well, we've been discussing this for around 2 weeks, and I think we've gotten it through our heads that most parties in this House agree on it. So we're really wondering what's going on here. Last week, we saw an article that stated that the number of deaths in the streets of Quebec, people who had fallen victim to homelessness, has tripled over 5 years. 200 people have died in Quebec due to cold in the streets of Quebec. That means if we extrapolate to all of Canada, 700 or 800 people may have died in the streets of Canada. All of this due to the housing crisis, which we are not discussing in this House right now, because we're wasting time debating a motion which everyone agrees on. We all agree about accountability. We all agree about transparency. We are ready to vote on this matter. What are the Conservatives waiting for?
Honorable député de Red Deer-Lacombe.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if we in this House all agreed, then the documents would have been produced as requested. So to suggest that we all agree in this House is simply not true. The government does not agree, which is why it's failing to fulfill the order passed in this House, which is to provide all of the documents requested unredacted. So, and I'll just say to my colleague from the Bloc Québécois, if he is dissatisfied with how the people of Quebec are suffering under this government, then he has to answer for the fact that he voted to sustain this government in matters of confidence. Canadians have had enough. He's had enough. So what we should have, instead of this dystopian parliament that exists without the support of Canadians, he should be supporting non-confidence and making sure that we move to an election so that Canadians and Quebecers can have their say.
Commentaire, questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, this is nothing but a game for the leader of the Conservative Party and the Conservative caucus. Nothing but a game. At the end of the day, if they stop talking, it passes. The Liberal Party wants to see it to go to committee. They know that, Mr. Speaker. But the games continue. You know, the only government in the history of Canada to be held in contempt of Parliament in the history of Canada, in fact the Commonwealth, is Stephen Harper's government. By the way, when he was Prime Minister, who was the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister? No one but the leader of the Conservative Party. Today we have the leader of the Conservative Party saying he doesn't even want to get the security clearance, Mr. Speaker. The question is why? What is the history? What does the leader of the Conservative Party have to hide? Yeah. Why isn't he being accountable to the public, to the Canadian people, Mr. Speaker?
I know we are getting close to question period, and quite honestly, I didn't have any trouble hearing the Honourable Member ask the question, so I just want to make sure that we keep the tone down in the House. The Honourable Member for Red Deer-Lacombe.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's just a red herring that the Parliamentary Secretary continues to bring up in this House. Look, members of Parliament from all political parties have security clearances. The leader of the Conservative Party has said quite clearly if the Prime Minister and his Cabinet and caucus are so sure about themselves, they can simply release the names. I urge my colleague who asked the question to go to caucus this week and bring this up. That is, if they're not dealing with something else at caucus.
Then comment, question commentaire, the honourable member for Caribou Prince George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I listened intently to my honourable colleague with his speech and intervention, and he's done an incredible job over the last 9 years since I've been a member of Parliament exposing this government's corruption and scandal. Mr. Speaker, for those that are in the gallery that perhaps missed what we were talking about, and those in TV land that are watching, we're talking about over $400 million in taxpayer funds that the Auditor General found 186 conflicts of interest where Liberal insiders funneled that $480 million to their own pockets, into their own companies. So through you, Mr. Speaker, I will ask our honourable colleague, which I've asked our colleagues before, if somebody steals from you, do you go to a committee or do you go to the RCMP?
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Well, I want to thank my sensible colleague from British Columbia for asking that question. Look, I said in my remarks, Mr. Speaker, that if this was a private sector company and there was over $400 million of suspected fraudulent activity going on in that company would have a responsibility to its shareholders if it was publicly traded, and a responsibility to its board and ownership if it was privately held, to take that information to the police for an investigation as soon as possible. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, if they had that information in the private sector and didn't proceed with charges, one could assume that they were negligent or even compromised themselves, which I think, Mr. Speaker, my answer speaks for itself.
Comments? The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
What, 3 weeks? 3 weeks into this debate, and yet we still have Conservative members being purposefully obtuse about what's actually before us. They wrote the motion to go to committee, and yet like they're pretending somehow that it's everybody else that's obstructing. So when they talk about Liberal insiders, will the honourable member finally come clean with Canadians and note that on March 24th, 2022, the same person in question, Annette Verschuren, donated to the Conservative Party as well. In fact, they have a long history, Mr. Speaker, of donating to the Conservative Party. So will they come clean and just admit that Liberal, Tory, same old story?
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My colleague has tried to put on a brave face, but a basic civics course would let you know who the actual government is. The government is across the way, both from me and my colleague who just asked the question. Well, at least that used to be the way it was until he and his leader signed on to a supply and confidence agreement, which, by the way, enabled this kind of behavior for the last 2+ years. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a little bit rich to hear my colleague talking about this. He knows full well, because I'm a member of the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, he has sat at Procedure and House Affairs while I have been there, that if this issue goes towards the committee, it'll get buried, it'll get mired down in the committee. This is the appropriate place to be having this debate. This is the business of the nation. This is the stage of the business of the nation. We need to have that discussion and have it out right here in front of all Canadians, not buried away in some obscure committee in the basement of this place.
If you're not going to contribute to a conversation and just spam flags and random shit, like I'm just going to time you out for 10 minutes, you can come back in a bit.
Earlier, in regards to this question of privilege, it does appear, based on what I'm hearing, that all parties, all members are in support of this question of privilege and making sure that we are able to take the important work. I see the member who wants to chirp at me because he has a different question and he should wait his turn like I patiently just waited my turn. So the question I would ask to the member is, can he share, is there any member of Parliament or any political party who is opposed to this question of privilege? Second part of the question, does the member agree that we should perhaps call the question so that we can do the important work that this question of privilege is requesting this House and this place to do? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll remind my colleague that even though this debate has been going on for quite some time, this has been my first opportunity to speak on behalf of my constituents on this particular issue, and I was looking very much forward to that, Mr. Speaker. But as I also said in my remarks, and I don't know if my friend who asked the question was here, just this morning the Speaker tabled more documents in reference to this motion. The documents continue to be redacted. either in part or fully redacted from the various government agencies from which the government or from which the documents were requested. So Conservatives believe in transparency and accountability. We know the only way to get the full documents and to uphold the intent of the original motion that was passed is to make sure that those documents get deposited in this chamber before we dispose of this motion.
Well, that's all the time we have for that debate today, so, well, until later, I guess. Statements by members, déclaration de député. The honourable member for St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, it is with great pleasure that I rise today to celebrate the passing of the Pharmacare Act, one that will have an immense impact on the lives of Canadians and Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. Every Conservative in this House voted against the historic Pharmacare legislation at every step. Voted against legislation that will help 9 million women and gender-diverse Canadians access universal, single-pay contraceptives. Canadians have made it clear they don't want slogans. They want a government who will put their health first, including their reproductive rights, and making lasting impacts to the Canadian healthcare system. It is our Liberal government who is delivering just that.
The honourable member from Provencher.
Mr. Speaker, it's harvest, a time of thanksgiving for tens of thousands of farmers across Canada, including in my home province of Manitoba. Despite the Liberal NDP plan to quadruple the carbon tax on these hard-working individuals, Conservatives wish to express our gratitude to farmers. Manitoba's 20,000 farmers are renowned worldwide as consistent and reliable suppliers of safe, high-quality grains, oilseeds, livestock, and agri-food products. This reputation will continue to thrive despite the Liberal NDP effort to make them less competitive globally by quadrupling the carbon tax. In 2023, Manitoba's crop sector achieved a record $6.6 billion in revenue, with this year anticipated to be higher. Across Canada, the agriculture and agri-food system employs 2.3 million people and contributes 150.
Yeah, I tried looking for something saying that he was banned or barred from the US, but I could not find anything at all. I've been looking for like the past half hour.
Remember the farmer that made it possible. Thank you to our Canadian farmers.
The honourable member from Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Mr. Speaker, Pharmacare matters to my constituents in Dartmouth Cole Harbour, and I will never stop advocating for national Pharmacare. I don't believe that anyone should have to choose between paying their rent or paying for the prescription drugs they need. That's why we've laid a strong framework and launched the first phase.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense then. I don't know, though. If it shows up one day, but that would make sense.
Pharmacare plan, women will get the access they need or other medication just to try to make it last longer. Our Pharmacare plan will be there to support folks living with diabetes so they no longer need to worry about the costs. They can focus on their health and well-being. Mr. Speaker, Canada is the only country in the world with universal health care that does not provide universal coverage for prescription drugs. And our Liberal government is working to fix that.
The honourable member for Shefford. On October 11th, we marked International Day of the Girl Child under the theme Girls' Vision for the Future. It reminds us of the need for urgent action and persistent hope, driven by the power of girls' voices and their vision for the future. In 2011, the General Assembly of the United Nations created International Day of the Girl Child to recognize girls' rights and the obstacles they must overcome. Future generations will be disproportionately affected by global crises, climate change, international conflicts, poverty, and the rolling back of hard-earned progress towards equal rights. But they can't see this vision through alone. They need allies. And don't forget, the potential of 1.1 billion girls around the world is unlimited. They are breaking the glass ceilings maintained by stereotypes and exclusion, including those particular to children with disabilities and children from marginalized communities. And they're doing it as entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders of global movements for future generations. Let's go, girls.
The honourable member from West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Mr. Speaker, this past Saturday, British Columbians braved an atmospheric river to vote for their next government. While a clear majority of British Columbians voted for candidates that believe in the science behind climate change and vaccines and rejected the conspiracy theories that define the Conservative Party, the final makeup of the Legislative Assembly is still too close to call. We do know that West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country will have 3 first-time MLAs and all from different parties. Congratulations, Randy Neal and Lynn Block, for your incredible campaigns and hard work. But I want to give a special shout out to Jeremy Valeriot, who after being ahead on election day 4 years ago by 60 votes, unfortunately didn't win. But this Saturday, he was officially declared the winner and the first ever Green MLA for the mainland of British Columbia. All members of this House know the long days of door knocking, making phone calls and connecting with voters is physically and emotionally demanding. So I want to congratulate Corinne Kirkpatrick, Sarah Eftikar, Archie Carrio, Jen Ford, Yuri Fulmore, Chris Moore, Chris Horgesheimer, and Greg Reed for putting your name forward to be in the spotlight to represent our communities. Our province and democracy are better for it.
The honourable member from Peterborough, Kawartha.
The Finance Minister has missed the 2024 deficit target by 17%, making debt servicing charges the fastest growing budget item. It is Small Business Week. Can you imagine if the CFO of a business spent the majority of the budget on paying debt? They would be replaced or the company would go bankrupt. I recently did a post on my Facebook asking for stories about my community of Peterborough, Kawartha, and I received hundreds of comments about businesses donating time and money to affordable housing, organizations, and volunteers helping with the homelessness and opioid crisis. But this comment from Alan Clark really jumped off the page. The community has done more than the government to help the people. That is so true, Alan. The most compassionate thing a leader can do is make life more affordable. It is time for a government and leader who knows budgets don't balance themselves. It is time for a leader who empowers small businesses, cuts the taxes, and allows them to flourish and give to our community. Together, Conservatives will build a Canada that works for the people who do the work.
Yeah. The honourable member from Surrey Centre.
Mr. Speaker, last week the RCMP revealed to Canadians allegations of transnational aggression by the Indian government. This includes tying murders of Canadian citizens on Canadian soil to agents of the government of India, the use of organized crime to target the Sikh community in Canada, and foreign interference in our democratic processes. This very serious evidence has sent shockwaves through the community. Since then, our allies in the United States, New Zealand, United Kingdom, and Australia have come to support us in our investigation and have urged the Indian government to cooperate. I want to remind the Indian government that Canadians will not be intimidated by the acts of foreign interference.
It was most likely just handed over with a smile and a wink, if I had to guess. I don't know what foreign aid policies we actually have enacted other than just handing over millions of dollars. But I know the United States has been handing over billions of dollars. And it's just been, it's going to be a never-ending war. Both sides are just going to get replenished from whoever is funding them, whatever side wants to help back them. North Korea was just told, or there were reports that North Korea was sending units over to Russia to help, something like 10 to 12,000. I don't know, man. It seems like it's just a never-ending thing, and they said it was going to be a never-ending thing. A lot of these military specialists and operators and all of that, when the Ukraine invasion war, whatever you want to call it, first happened, a lot of these specialists came out and were like, this is going to be a never-ending war. It's going to go on for years and years, and here we are, still backing and funding it. Crazy stuff. I don't know. Like, we have so many issues here in our country, and I just feel like we should be allocating that money to things going on here. That's just me personally, though.
Had reached monumental proportions. But we learned this week that the total number of federal public servants has gone up by 42%, with over 108,000 new employees on the public payroll. Costs, meanwhile, have gone up by...
Canada's pretty much already lost India. They removed officials from Canada here, and they sent them back to India. The relationship between the two countries, which was pretty strong at one point, is now, under Trudeau, not good at all. Especially when, you just keep allowing whatever to happen.
alone cost $21.6 billion in 2023-2024, a new record for our country. More bureaucrats, more consultants, fewer services to Canadians. That's a real scandal, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Did you know that Stephen Harper was the only Prime Minister in history and today that has actually been held of contempt of Parliament, Mr. Speaker? And interesting enough, the leader of the Conservative Party today, you know, the Conservative Reform Party, Mr. Speaker, he was his parliamentary secretary at the time. Is there any surprise that he would not want to get the security clearance necessary in order to understand what's happening on foreign interference, Mr. Speaker? That begs the question. What is the history? What is the past of the leader of the Conservative Party? Does he believe that he's not going to be able to get the security clearance? Is that the reason why he doesn't want it? Canadians have the right to know what is the past. What is he hiding, Mr. Speaker? I want to know. Canadians want to know. Why doesn't the leader of the Conservative Party step up and do the honourable thing and apply for the security clearance?
Here, here. That's a good question.
The honourable member from Mission Matsqui, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. This weekend in Surrey, over 15,000 people attended Ugly Potato Day, an initiative that invites residents to get imperfect produce for free from farmers. Over 250,000 pounds of produce was donated. Wow. Food insecurity is so harsh that residents were willing to wait in line in one of the worst storms we've seen for hours just to get the chance to get some potatoes and carrots for their families. Wow. Food Banks Canada reports that the cost of living has become so high that food bank use has increased by 50% since 2021. British Columbians have the second highest poverty rate in the country, impacting over 382,000 individuals. It's clear things are broken. Canadians need relief, but the Liberal NDP government is not listening. Only common sense Conservatives will reduce spending, eliminate the carbon tax, boost paychecks, and give families some much-needed relief, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Rock.
Thank you, Speaker. After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Liberals once again find themselves mired in corruption and controversy as witness after witness testified that the Prime Minister and his ministers stood idly by while billions were stolen by businesses falsely claiming to be Indigenous owned. The Assembly of First Nations have testified that the vast majority of companies taking advantage of the Liberal government's Indigenous contracting program are actually shell companies. Rather than helping Conservatives uncover the truth and solve this problem, Liberal MPs held up committee and failed to address the issue of billions being misspent. Wow. While Liberal MPs stall and deflect, common sense Conservatives will continue to investigate the contracting abuse and theft taking place under this Liberal government. We Charity, SNC Lavalin, the Green Slush Fund, ArriveCan, foreign interference, and now Indigenous procurement. When will the Prime Minister do the right thing and call an election?
The honourable member from Kingston in the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, last Monday, the RCMP took the unprecedented step to inform Canadians that agents of the Government of India are involved in serious criminal activity on Canadian soil. These crimes represent a grave threat to our national security. Yet the leader of the Conservative Party is displaying a concerning lack of seriousness in response to the RCMP's alarming announcement. His failure to acknowledge the severity of these actions undermines public confidence in our institutions and Canada's commitment to upholding justice. As Shashi Kurl, president of Angus Reid, said, "I think that's folly, and frankly, I think he should grow up, get the security clearance, and find out what he needs to find out." At a time when a unified response is required, the leader of the opposition's dismissal sends the wrong message both domestically and internationally. Canadians expect their leaders to prioritize national security and rule of law above partisan politics.
Colleagues, Declarations by members Standing Order 31 is an important opportunity for all members to have the opportunity to express themselves freely. The honourable member from Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou knows very well and caught my eye during that time. So I'd ask him not to take the microphone, not to take the floor unless recognized by the Speaker. The honourable member from Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to mark the passing of Kirsten Patrick, a young 34-year-old resident of Smithers whose life ended last Monday at the Smithers District Hospital. I knew Kirsten for most of the time that I've lived in Smithers. I remember her broad smile. I remember the way that she greeted everyone on Main Street, including our mayor. Kirsten lived an unimaginably difficult life, one marked by trauma, addiction, violence, homelessness, and loss. For the past several years, she lived in a tent. She was a fighter, she was a survivor, a neighbor, and a friend. My heart today goes out to her mom, Marina, to her kids, to her partner, Casey, and to everyone who knew and loved her. Kirsten's life mattered, and she'll be deeply missed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Salaberry-Surwa. It's with great pride that I congratulate today Melissa Bourdon, who was recently awarded Farmer of the Year for Montérégie West. Whether it's working on the farm or in the fields, working in sales to clients, Ms. Bourdon has been innovating everywhere in the business that she manages with her father, Francois. She's well supported by her family and friends in 1,001 projects, and she even finds the time to be a volunteer firefighter in Saint-Étienne-de-Beauharnois and is also an active member of the UPA. Ms. Bourdon is a brilliant woman who will continue to make hay in the farming field for many years through her passion and her sense of engagement. I would also like to honour Ms. Ange-Marie Delforge, who won an award of recognition, a well-deserved award for a woman who's known for her straight talk and especially for her determination to fight for our farmers. My congratulations to all women fighting for farmers in unions, and thank you to all the women farming in Montérégie West.
The honourable member from Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, we have more proof that this costly NDP Liberal coalition is not worth the cost, crime, or corruption. Mr. Speaker, you have ruled that the government has violated an order of this House. The Liberals are paralyzing Parliament to hide $400 million of corruption. There are 186 contracts the Auditor General found that went to Liberal appointees, contracts that must be turned over to the police. These contracts aren't just documents. They represent money stolen from the pockets of Canadians and given to the friends of the Prime Minister and his cronies. Money that Canadians could have used for rent, groceries, and gas. The solution is simple. They need to obey your ruling, Mr. Speaker, turn over the documents, and make Parliament work. This is the common sense plan, the Conservative plan. Common sense Conservatives are here to deliver solutions for the doubling of housing costs, food inflation, and crime and chaos on our streets. It's time for common sense. It's time for ethics and integrity. It's time to bring it home.
If members will forgive me, I say it's very good to welcome and to recognize the honourable member from Etobicoke North.
Mr. Speaker, I am grateful to be with friends and colleagues, thankful for the support so many of you have shown me, and looking forward to being back with you. I'm especially grateful to doctors, scientists, and healthcare professionals for their medicine, research, and caring that has allowed me to work every day for the community I love through multiple surgeries, radiation, and ongoing chemotherapy. I know there are people on the Hill who have gone through cancer or are going through it now, and my heart is with you. Cancer touches all of us, and it's hard. Sometimes the fight is week by week, sometimes hour by hour. It can be lonely despite having the best support system. To those who are hurting, know that you have one more person in your corner. I understand, I support you, and I walk beside you and your family as you climb every hill.
Oral questions. Questions orales. L'honorable.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 9 years, this Prime Minister has doubled debt, doubled the cost of housing, to the extent that the cost of a monthly mortgage payment in Quebec is $1,055 higher than it was 5 years ago. That's a 74% increase. And there's 2 million Canadians that have to go to food banks when this government is wasting our money, and the government is paralyzed by this cover-up of a $400 million scandal. What is this Prime Minister doing? He's saving his skin and his own members. Can he trigger an election? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that the Conservatives are starting with a question with respect to the Canadian economy, because I think that each of us can be happy that the inflation levels in September were at 1.6%. This is a great success for all Canadians. It will truly improve the life of Canadians, but the Conservatives don't want to talk about Canadian successes. The Honourable
Guys, where the fuck is Trudeau? Another day without him?
Are going through hell with doubling of housing costs and out of control cost of living. What is the Prime Minister doing? He's trying to save his own skin, save his own members. And they're in a rebellion now. So he's not working for Canadians. He's working to save himself. It's strange. Even if the Liberals don't really have trust in this Prime Minister, the Bloc leader continues to have trust in this Prime Minister. Will the PM trigger an election finally so we can fix what he broke? The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The question is why the Bloc leader, or the rather Conservative leader, is obstructing the House of this work. We won 2 confidence votes, and it's only the Conservatives that don't want to have another vote because they'll lose once again, because this House does not have confidence in the Leader of the Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This weekend in Cloverdale, 15,000 people lined up in the pouring rain for the hopes that they might get a few rejected potatoes. It was Ugly Potato Day in that city. And 15,000 British Columbians are too hungry and desperate that they needed to go and collect those rejected foodstuffs. 2 million Canadians are lined up at food banks. There are 1,400 homeless encampments in Ontario today. And what is the Prime Minister doing? Working to save his political skin from his revolting caucus. This can't go on. Will he call a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable.
Brace your ears. Brace your ears.
Mr. Speaker, I would really hope that every single MP in this House would agree that in our great country, no one should ever go hungry. But when Conservatives talk about the most vulnerable, they are crying crocodile tears. And how do I know that, Mr. Speaker? I know that because
she's
they
a
have had the
crocodile
gall
herself.
to vote against a national school food program, a program that will feed 400,000 Canadian kids. How can they look themselves in the face when they oppose feeding Canadian kids?
Yes, that's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
That program, though it has costed millions, has not fed a single hungry child. It has fed bureaucracy, which is all it ever was intended to do. Meanwhile, 2 million people are lined up at food banks. We've got 15,000 people that will line up for a, quote, ugly potato because they can't afford to eat. We have diseases like scurvy that are back. And 1 in 4 kids go to school hungry after 9 years of this Prime Minister, yet his priority is saving his political career from his revolting caucus. This cannot go on. Will he call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are damning themselves with their own words. I was at a school in downtown Winnipeg on Friday. I was there with Premier Wab Kinew, and we gave those beautiful, wonderful children some bannock, a little carton of milk, some jam, some butter, and a banana. That was not bureaucracy that fed those kids. That was the deal we've done with Manitoba. The Conservatives are against feeding kids.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Are you kidding me? She says that Canadians should be happy that while 1 in 4 kids go to school hungry, while 2 million people line up at food banks, while scurvy is making a comeback after 9 years of this government, Canadians should be grateful that she showed up with a few snacks and a photo op at one school. Mr. Speaker, this is the same finance minister who has just blown back $7 billion past her deficit target, meaning more inflation and higher rates. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister hides in the fetal position under his desk. Will he call a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we have clearly knocked the Leader of the Opposition off his game this week. Because how can we have the temerity to talk about actual meals fed to actual children as bureaucracy? That tells you how cynical and how low these Canadians go. And then he talks about inflation. Mr. Speaker, it's been in the Bank of Canada's target range for 9 months in a row. It fell below 2% in September, and rates have come down 3 times. That's what's happening with inflation, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Where is the pilot on the Liberal plane? It's October 21st. They only have 8 days left to pass C-319 and boost seniors' pensions. Otherwise, they'll be heading to an election. Pension increases. The Conservatives are for it. The NDP is too. 79% of Canadians are for it. And even the Liberals voted for it at committee. There doesn't seem to be a Liberal pilot, and they just have 8 days to go. Is that why the Liberals want to kick their leader out? The Honourable Minister of Employment. Mr. Speaker, thanks to the Canadian government, the Liberal government, we have been able to bring the retirement age down to 65, and we increased the GIS, and we have been able to help hundreds of millions of Quebecers with dental care. And this has allowed us to bring the poverty level down for seniors well below the national average without the support and help of the Bloc. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Guess who hasn't said a word yet about C-282, blocked by 2 senators? Yes, the Prime Minister himself. He has never asked Peter Boehm or Peter Harder to do their job. Not a word. They're too busy removing the daggers from their backs. Yet, not only did he appoint 2 senators, he also has a personal relationship with Peter Harper. He's already called him personally several times for advice. Can he now call his buddy Peter and tell him to do his job? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My colleague knows perhaps that the reason why we're talking about supply management in Canada, it's because there was a Liberal government that did establish supply management for Quebec and the rest of Canada. And the reason why we haven't, negotiations with the Trump government negotiated with the Liberals, and this is how we were able to fight tooth and nail for supply management and Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, country first, party second. According to the RCMP,
Okay, Jagmeet, okay.
are thugs to terrorize
That's
Canadians.
fucking,
The Conservatives
wow.
are laughing about this, but people have died as a result, and they've meddled in our politics. The Prime Minister has said that there are multiple Conservative MPs and or candidates compromised. They may be sitting in the chamber right now, but the Conservative leader chooses ignorance. Has the Prime Minister directly urged the leader of the Conservatives to get his security clearance?
What a bad statement to start off with. What a fucking idiot.
Minister for Public Security.
Mr. Speaker, we thank our honourable colleague for the question. We've been clear. We think all party leaders in this House should have the required security clearance so they can receive information concerning the threats to this House or the threats to Canada involving foreign interference. We also take the comments of Leader of the NDP very seriously with respect to protecting Sikh Canadians and protecting those who've been victims of this foreign interference by the Government of India. My responsibility as Public Safety Minister is to ensure the safety of all Canadians, and that's exactly what we're going to continue to do.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
First, party second. I dare the Conservatives to laugh again. I see they're not. They're quiet.
Narendra Modi must not see that a Canadian leader is willing to turn a blind eye to crimes committed against Canadians. Every of this House must condemn India's interference, and there must be consequences for parliamentarians who contribute to it. Did the Prime Minister directly urge the Conservative leader to apply for his security clearance? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was very clear. We fundamentally believe that all party leaders in this House must have their security clearance appropriately so they can learn what is needed to manage their parliamentary caucuses and understand the threats that Canadians are facing. And I applaud fully the feelings of the NDP leader in terms of condemning the Government of India's interference, and I congratulate the work of the RCMP for their work, and I know that the investigation underway will prove to be trustworthy.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, it seems that no part of Canadian life is safe from the Finance Minister's radical tax rampage. Not food, not home, not gas, and not even music. In response to new streaming taxes from this government, Spotify just announced that they're raising subscription fees by 15%. Even the simple things like kicking back and listening to your playlist isn't immune from this greedy government. When will the Finance Minister wake up, face the music, and finally admit that her new taxes and spending are not worth the cost?
The Honourable Minister for Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives once again are making the talking points of platforms that are making millions in Canada, and they have done so for years. Like all Canadian companies, they contribute to our system, but this is not the first time that they've raised their subscriber prices. This time, when it comes to helping our Canadian artists, the Conservatives speak out against it. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not really surprised, once again, that they're in the pockets of these digital giants.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
There our hands are in the pockets of average Canadians. The finance minister told Canadians to cut Disney Plus, and she's probably going to tell them to cut their Spotify subscriptions too. They say that taxes will fix climate change in the economy. They say that paying more taxes is going to lead Canadians to be better off, and all while they talk down to people. The carbon tax is up. The streaming tax is up. Capital gains taxes are up. And the finance minister missed her target by 17%. When will she admit that she has failed, axe the taxes, and let Canadians live their...
Honestly, I kind of agree with the cut the Disney Plus thing. Disney's fucking dog shit now. They make terrible entertainment. They're not a good media company anymore. They are absolute trash.
For natural resources and energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We on this side of the House actually have a plan for a prosperous economic future for this country. The Conservatives, who continue to deny the existence of climate change, have a plan that leads backwards, not forwards. We are ensuring that things like the $12 billion Dow plant in Alberta is getting built, the $7 billion Jansen potash mine, electric vehicle and battery plants, hydrogen facilities in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador. We have a plan for a future that is a great and prosperous future. They have no plan.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Here are the consequences of the NDP Liberal plan. A new report shows that 35% of Alberta families are skipping meals because of high food costs. And yet, the Liberals and NDP tell Canadians they've never had it so good. But I'd like to remind the Prime Minister that his own parliamentary budget officer confirmed that Canadians are worse off paying the carbon tax. In fact, when the NDP Liberals quadruple the carbon tax, it will cost Alberta families $2,000 a year. Will the NDP Liberals just finally admit their carbon tax is a scam and call a carbon tax election?
The honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we continue to fight for Canadian families. How do we do that, Mr. Speaker? One way is the Canada Child Benefit, Mr. Speaker. Families with children under the age of 6 can receive almost $7,800 each and every year per child, Mr. Speaker. This is tangible support that arrives each and every month to help families afford the basics or whatever their child needs. This is how we fight on this side for Canadian families, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Foothills.
I'd like to give the minister some actual facts of what real Canadian families are facing. Fact, 35% of Alberta families are skipping meals because of high food costs. Fact, food bank usage in Mississauga is up 60%. Fact, doctors are warning about scurvy because Canadians can't afford nutritious food. Fact, food inflation in Canada is 37% higher than the United States. Fact, their own parliamentary budget officer admitted and confirmed the carbon tax is all pain, no gain. Fact, the NDP Liberal government can end the pain they're inflicting on Canadians if they call a carbon tax election. Will they do it?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, cutting a check that low-income Canadians are getting, the vast majority of them, over 80%, are getting more than they pay, is not going to fix an issue like scurvy. What's going to fix scurvy is certainly not cutting our health system. It's not getting rid of diabetes medication or getting rid of free dental care. It's not attacking the foundations of our health system, just as we're working with provinces and territories on solutions. Mr. Speaker, what is going to get it done in a time of global uncertainty is collaboration and working together, not nonsense slogans.
The honourable member for Bellechasse, Les Chemin-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, the numbers speak for themselves. A September survey from the Quebec Association of Real Estate Brokers shows that the median price of a single-family home in Quebec has reached $450,000, an increase of 74% in 5 years. First-time homebuyers now face an additional monthly expense of $1,055. In Saguenay, the purchase price has risen by $130,000, making home ownership even more difficult. What does the Bloc Liberal Coalition intend to do to help Quebecers? The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. Mr. Speaker, the question is very interesting. The member knows that we're investing to build affordable housing in Quebec and across the country. In Quebec, we're investing more than $9 million to build houses. It's interesting because the Conservative were against this program to build housing. When the Conservative leader was housing minister, he only built 6 housing units across our country, and this is unacceptable.
His arms are flapping because he's a bird.
Once again, the figures are alarming. In Trois-Rivières, the price of a single-family home has risen by $190,050. In Drummondville, it's an increase of $204,000. And that's not counting the other costs associated with owning a home. These increases testify to a growing crisis that merits urgent action. In concrete terms, what does the Bloc Liberal Coalition intend to do? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a coincidence that the Conservative leader is here today because I'd like to ask him to help me. Across Quebec, including in my colleague's riding, we'd like to find the 6 affordable housing units that the leader built across this country during his term. We still haven't found them. Could he come with me to Quebec to find them?
Yeah, at least turkeys are useful a couple times a year. I can't think of one day or month that these people are useful, especially the Liberals.
Be a serious mistake to take secularism for granted. On the contrary, we need to do even more. In Quebec, we're witnessing a return of religion in our schools after decades of fighting to keep it out. Gender equality, the separation of religion and state, is at the heart of Quebec's integration model, and it must be protected at all times, systematically, relentlessly. Can the government now pledge not to challenge Bill 21 at the Supreme Court? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, there are Bloc members that confuses the Quebec's government's responsibility with that of Canada's. We are not responsible for education. Perhaps the Bloc would like it to be, but it's not the Canadian government's responsible. If my colleague wishes it, I would ask him to seek a seat at the National Assembly of Quebec. The Honourable Member for Drummond. One day we will get there, Mr. Speaker. But I'd like to remind this House that it offers every day before it begins its work. And I'd like to remind you that this government continues to maintain a religious exception in the criminal code for calls to violence, even murder. And this is very serious. I'd like to remind you that the Prime Minister appointed a representative who spends her time accusing Quebec's Bill 21 of every evil. And we're just growing further and further away from secularism. Will this government listen to reason and restrain its irresistible urge to weaken the Quebec model of secularism? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague talks about urge. Well, if he does have an urge to talk about Quebec's responsibilities, we'd ask him to at the next elections to run for a seat at the Quebec National Assembly. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Usually I have respect for my colleague, but he's not even listening to my question and he's just saying anything. Quebec has chosen an integration model based on common values, gender equality, separation of religion and state, and our historical heritage. Ottawa can choose the opposite model, multiculturalism, which basically tells people they don't have to change anything. They don't have to integrate. And they say, well, it's no big deal. The federal integration model is contrary to that of Quebec's. When will this government or the next government understand that multiculturalism doesn't work in Quebec? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite all of these efforts, I find it hard to answer a question that is on provincial jurisdiction.
From Regina Capel.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, Canadians are worse off. The effects of his deficits, his inflation, and his carbon tax hikes have been devastating. A new report by the Angus Reid Institute says that a majority of Canadians are struggling just to be able to buy food. And of course, that's even worse for low-income households, with 2/3 of those Canadians saying they can't even afford to feed their families. Yeah. One way to lower food prices would be to axe the carbon tax on the farmer who grows the food, the trucker who ships the
food and the grocer who sells the food. The Prime Minister could do that today. Will he show some compassion, lower food prices, and just axe the tax?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every day we see the Conservatives get up in this House and tell mistruths. 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back than they pay in the price on pollution. Of course, it is no surprise when you hear what their closest friends and allies have to say. Danielle Smith believes planes are spraying chemtrails. Ches Crosby says climate change is bogus. And John Rustad says fighting climate change is a plot to reduce the human population and force people to eat bugs. Mr. Speaker, they say you can tell a lot about people from the company they keep. Well, Mr. Speaker, you certainly can.
Trudeau's probably on another vacation or something. I don't fucking know, man.
Reference to a particular member. I encourage all members, please, to
Greg is laying the smack
away
down.
from the line, especially in regards to using that word. The honourable member from Regina Capel.
Obviously, the carbon tax scheme isn't making Canadians better off. Otherwise, 2/3 of low-income Canadians wouldn't be reporting that they can't afford to pay for groceries, and they wouldn't be lining up at food banks or waiting hours to get rejected potatoes. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, the government's own watchdog, has concluded that when you factor in all the costs of the carbon tax, and remember, Canadians don't get to pick and choose which costs they pay, when you factor it all in, after they're done quadrupling the carbon tax, a family in Ontario will be $1,400 poorer. New Brunswick, $1,000 poorer. Saskatchewan, $2,000 poorer. So why not let the people decide in a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, the Parliamentary Budget Officer and 300 economists across this country have said that 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back, and it works directly inverse to income. By taking away the price on pollution, you will actually make the most vulnerable more vulnerable. The Leader of the Opposition and his caucus know that, but certainly...
The Chair is having some difficulty hearing the answer of the Honourable Member. I'm going to ask the Honourable Minister just to start from the top. I'm going to ask all members, please, I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from Foothills, please, to not speak when not recognized by the Chair. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But we know that the Conservative Party of Canada actually doesn't believe in the reality of climate change, nor do they have a plan for the economic future. They are no different from Mr. Rustad, who has endorsed the Leader of the Opposition, who says we should not be trying to fight climate change. The narrative about climate I can only put to the fact that somehow they think we need to reduce the world population. And many other candidates have essentially said we do not need to fight climate change. Well, Canadians know that climate change is real. Canadians know you need a plan for the future of the economy, and that is what is on this side of the House. Shame on you.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Order.
Uh-oh.
I can take some slings and arrows, but I'm certain the Honourable Member wasn't referring to the Speaker. The Honourable Member from Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up.
That's right.
I recently visited a local food bank in Dauphin, Manitoba, where the volunteers told me they can't keep up with the increased demand. But this Prime Minister does not care, as he plans to quadruple the carbon tax and force Manitoba families to pay $1,300 in carbon taxes every single year.
Unbelievable.
Manitobans can't afford this costly carbon tax. So when will the Prime Minister give Canadians a choice and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently had the opportunity to be in Manitoba and to speak with some parents about what they're facing there. I had the opportunity to announce alongside the Deputy Prime Minister that we've come to an agreement on our national school food program that will see this school year, Mr. Speaker, over 19,000 more children receive food at school, over a $17 million commitment over 3 years. That's what we do on this side of the House to ensure that families are supported, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, flight attendants, who are predominantly women, work an average of 35 hours a month unpaid. Wow. Consecutive Liberal and Conservative governments have overlooked this issue for decades. Yeah. The big airline bosses are profiting off of unpaid labor of flight attendants. It's time for this exploitation to end. Today, I will be tabling a bill to end unpaid work for all flight attendants in Canada. Will this government support it?
Good question. Here.
Well, hold on. Flight attendants and most flight companies are union-based, so they take a cut of your salary every month. So that might be why there is a difference in salary.
Take it from there. Flight attendants have a collective agreement which sets out their hours and their wages, and it's not my place to comment on it, Mr. Speaker.
And I know that from experience. I worked at an airport.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, they are dying in the streets, on park benches, in alleyways, or even in outdoor toilets. The number of homeless individuals who have died has skyrocketed. It has tripled over the last few years. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because many of the deaths are not recorded. This housing crisis is killing people. And the Liberals and the Conservatives have let this crisis get worse in order to make big developers richer. They have placed profits above people. What will the Liberals do to house people and save lives? The Honourable Minister for Economic Development of Quebec. My colleague and I both represent the eastern part of Montreal. And we see that there is a human crisis here. Unlike the Conservatives, who are exploiting this misery to score points, we on this side of the House will be working hard with municipalities to put a roof over everyone's head.
Exploiting the misery? You've caused the misery.
Mr. Speaker, recently I spoke in this House about the growth of radical far-right movements. They've organized disinformation campaigns, impacted how some people and politicians treat others, and have led some politicians to act against the best interests of Canadians. Our government has said that Canada will stand with the Ukrainian people until they win. Ukraine must win because their victory is essential to Canada's security. There is a coordinated Russian campaign to spread disinformation, sow distrust, and encourage isolationism. Could the Minister of International Trade please share with us how Russian foreign interference is a threat to our support of Ukraine and to all Canadians?
How does a country with no ties to us at all, how do we depend on that for our security?
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for Etobicoke Centre for his steadfast support for Ukraine. The Conservative leaders' dismissal of Ukraine as a faraway land is shameful.
Shame.
Their willingness to appease far-right disinformation, often fueled by foreign actors like Russia, undermines democracy and the Canadian values. Canadians deserve leadership that stands firmly against these dangerous influences. While Conservatives abandon Ukraine, on this side of the House, we will keep supporting Ukraine until they win this war. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh man, which is probably going to be never, so we're fucked, guys. Good luck as Canadians.
To not take the floor when they are not recognized by the chair, so that the chair can listen and all members can hear the questions and the answers. The honourable member from Haldimand, Norfolk.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time is up. At a time when Canadians are skipping meals and many are living paycheck to paycheck, the Liberals have siphoned $400 million of taxpayer money to contracts for their friends at the Green Slush Fund. The Liberal-appointed board has racked up at least 186 conflict of interest. When will this government end the cover-up so that this House can get back to helping Canadians deal with the cost of living crisis that they create?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Disappointing, Mr. Speaker. After 9 years,
The same
Oh,
slogan,
no, he
Mr.
is
Speaker.
here.
The same time of disinformation. The same time of false accusation.
The Chihuahua.
Time to get real. The Conservatives know very well that we acted timely to dissolve that organization, Mr. Speaker. The board has resigned, the CEO has resigned, and the organization no longer exists. We made a solemn promise to Canadians was to go to the bottom of this. That's what we did, Mr. Speaker, and they should let this House do the important work is to work for Canadians instead of filibustering their own motion, Mr. Speaker. It's shameful what they're doing.
It's shameful that we have to listen to that guy speak.
Order. The honourable member from Haldeman Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, what is shameful is cover-up. This Liberal government is still in contempt of Parliament by refusing to turn over the documents that could certainly reveal the depths of their corruption at the Green Slush Fund. So now they have paralyzed Parliament in order to hide their scandal. Meanwhile, Canadians are suffering through unprecedented food, crime, and housing crisis that they created. Will they finally turn over the documents today and give Canadians the answers that they deserve?
That's right. The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What my honourable colleague is saying is false. The government has handed over thousands of documents, just done so in a way that protects the charter rights of Canadians. What is true, Mr. Speaker, is that the Conservatives are filibustering their own motion because they don't want to respect your ruling, which asked that this unprecedented motion would go to committee. Mr. Speaker, I think there's only one thing the Conservatives are afraid of. They don't want this House to get to work because they know that if there's another confidence motion, the Conservative leader will lose it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There you go. Here.
The honourable member from Barrie Innisfil.
Well, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal coalition, taxes, costs, and crime are all up, and now their time is up. After Liberal-appointed board members of SDTC were caught funneling $400 million tax dollars to 186 of their companies, why won't the NDP Liberals end the cover-up today by releasing the documents as Parliament ordered and that you agreed with, Mr. Speaker, so that there can be accountability for the obvious corruption and potential crimes that have taken place under this costly coalition?
The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The truth is, your ruling was to send this matter to committee for further study because it was unprecedented what the Conservatives were asking for. Mr. Speaker, we agree with your ruling. It is only the Conservatives who are obstructing their own obstruction because they don't want the truth to come out, which is that they are trying to abuse the extraordinary privileges they have to override the rights of Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Barrie Innisfil.
Well, the truth is that there is more proof there that these Liberals are not worth the cost, the crime, and the corruption. Here are the facts. 186 conflicts of interest took place. 400 million tax dollars were funneled to the companies of Liberal-appointed board members. You, Mr. Speaker, ruled that the evidence needs to be handed over unredacted as Parliament has demanded. Why are the NDP Liberals not releasing the documents? What and who are they covering up for?
The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
It's typical of the Conservatives to omit the facts that are inconvenient to them because the fact of the matter is that we have provided thousands of pages of documents already, that we are respecting your ruling, which is to send this matter to committee for further study, because I think, as all Canadians would appreciate and expect, they expect that police follow due process. They expect that parliamentarians support their rights. They would expect that parliamentarians don't try to abuse their extraordinary powers to go after their own partisan vendettas and attack Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good answer.
The honourable member for Rivière du Nord. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, 3 vehicles have been set on fire in just 3 days in Ahuntsic. The federal government needs to realize that Quebec is now once again in a gang war with members that are younger and younger, practically child soldiers. This war is also costing innocent lives, like the lives of Léonore Géaudy and her 7-year-old daughter Vérane, who were collateral victims of criminal arson in Old Montreal on October 5th. And yet we're getting radio silence from Ottawa. What is this government waiting for? Why doesn't it crack down on these criminal gangs? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, we are not waiting. We are taking strong action. We are increasing staffing at the RCMP. We are investing in areas
yes,
where
that's fantastic. The Liberal-run RCMP is gonna fucking save the world. My God, this guy is out of touch.
a positive discussion with Minister Bonnardel.
We're gonna hire more RCMP and then tell them to investigate us. Wow.
In what he's doing to ensure, for example, that drones cannot smuggle contraband into Quebec prisons.
I can't with this fucking government anymore, man. They just... Oh my God.
That's just not enough, Mr. Speaker. This gang warfare is affecting all of Quebec. In Montreal, 2 people died in an extortion-related arson case. In Frampton, a 14-year-old youth died, and it seems that it was because he was trying to attack the Hells Angels. Imagine that. In Quebec and in Quebec City and in maritime Quebec, it's been open warfare for months. On September 20th, Quebec police was warning other police agencies that this warfare could be even worse than in the 90s, and it's only gotten more serious since then. Does the government understand how bad things are getting? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we understand that we need to protect the public in Quebec and elsewhere, and that's exactly what we're doing every day. I am very pleased to see that the RCMP is working with its Quebec partners, whether the Montreal Police, the Quebec Police, Quebec City Police. Mr. Duhem, the RCMP Commissioner, often talks to me about the fact that there are joint groups that are working hard to do something about gang warfare. We will continue to work hard, and I do believe that the Bloc Québécois should be supporting the federal government in this.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
In another conflict of interest involving this Liberal government's de facto finance minister, we found out that he's been caught using his access to lobby governments to benefit himself and his company. It's carbon tax Carney's heat pump hustle. And he's claiming it's green policy, but his only policy is to line his pockets with green. And this Prime Minister is shielding him from Canada's conflict of interest laws and lobbying regulations after 9 years of these NDP Liberals. Taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Will they just have carbon tax Carney testify at committee?
Carbon tax Carney. My God.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, the Conservatives, when they have Canadians that oppose their policies, all they know how to do is attack them. Instead of respecting people and their differences of opinions, they go after them personally. Mr. Speaker, that's not how leaders in this country should act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, I can assure the member opposite that Canadians take it personally, that every time that they're given the opportunity, they don't help out Canadians, but instead help out well-connected Liberal insiders like Mark Carney with his heat pump hustle, carbon tax Carney, conflict of interest Carney. It's stacking up in such a way that we can't even keep track of all the scandals involving the de facto finance minister when the Prime Minister lost confidence in the finance minister. So now Canadians want answers about the access that carbon tax Carney has been given and all the Canadian tax dollars that he's lining his pockets with. Will they just instruct the de facto finance minister to testify at committee?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, again, there they go attacking private citizens, and it just goes to show anytime a Canadian citizen speaks up against them, what do? They go on the personal attack. But, Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Conservatives and the Conservative leader. Why will he get his security clearance, Mr. Speaker? It's a question Canadians across this country are asking because they want to know what and who is he trying to protect. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this government, we have taxes up, we have costs up, times up, and credit card fees are up. And this a
Oh, it's a new one, credit card fees.
But this announcement flopped like a soggy pancake. Strike, where Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney sits on the board, said savings won't be passed on to consumers because of other rising costs. Wow, even Liberal insiders tied to oligopolies know that this government's announcements fall flat. When will these governments learn it's not Carney Canadians need, it's competition, and a Prime Minister who will flip real results for Canadians and their families?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, the question on Canadians' minds this week is why will the Leader of the Opposition not get his security clearance?
That's right.
Mr. Speaker, every Canadian is wondering, what is it that he is trying to hide, or what is it that he is trying to protect? It's an easy thing
Did I
to
hear
do.
that right?
All the other leaders in this place have done it. Why won't the Leader of the Opposition get his security clearance?
Did Freeland just say that's finally a good question? Oh my god.
I would invite all members not to speak.
There hasn't been any good questions.
Floor from the Speaker. I know that the member for Mégantic-l'Érable understands. I would invite all members, not just on one side of the House. I would invite all members not to speak up while another member
Colleagues,
is asking
please.
a question. Or
She is the Wicked Witch of the West.
Mr. Speaker, the events of the past year and the announcement last week have shaken many Canadians, particularly those in Indo-Canadians and Sikh communities. Canada is a country rooted in the rule of law. The safety and security of our citizens is the top priority of our government. Can the Minister of Foreign Affairs update this House on the additional steps our government took to protect Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, of course I will. As I mentioned since the beginning, we have three priorities. First, seek the truth. Second, make sure that we protect Canadians. And thirdly, defend Canada's sovereignty. Based on information provided by the RCMP, we asked India to lift the diplomatic immunity on 6 of their diplomats. Unfortunately, India refused. And so, therefore, since Canadian safety was at risk, I decided to expel them from Canada. Let me be clear, Canada doesn't seek diplomatic confrontation with India, but of course, we won't sit idle with this information. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Charlebourg.
the honourable member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, for 3 weeks, the Minister of Justice has been blaming the Premier of Quebec for the crime that is running rampant in the province. Meanwhile, the Canadian, Quebec, and Montreal police associations have all supported my bill, C-325, which aimed to correct the serious error of the Liberal Bill C-5. We know that there is an eye-watering increase in crime in Quebec and Canadian communities. Will the minister finally admit that it is wrong to say that police associations don't know what they're talking about? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, as I have told the member many times, we need to remember who is responsible for parole. We have created changes, but it's up to the provinces to implement. We need enough space in our courts. We need to have enough prosecutors. We need enough space in prisons as well, in order to make sure that we can house people in our prisons when necessary.
House people in our prisons? What? What? Is that guy fucking insane?
Speaker, I see that the Minister of Justice of Canada is still blaming the Premier of Quebec for a situation they created. They're the ones who brought in bad legislation. They've caused the problem in federal penitentiaries. Everyone agrees. For example, the Federation of Women's Shelters and all sorts of victims groups. They are all saying the same thing. Victims groups, police association, everyone agrees, except the minister. Why won't he finally listen to us? The Honourable Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker. Look at what we've actually done on this side of the House. We invested $390 million to fight guns and gangs. We also increased sentences for certain crimes, for example, auto theft. And yet, the member across the way voted against that. And in addition...
Well, clearly whatever it was you guys voted on isn't working, because all of those things you were gonna fund are up tenfold. My God, man.
And we also expect Quebec to do its own fair share. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, the Petit Paris sawmill in Saint-Gilles-Minot closed one day earlier than expected, and 100 people lost their jobs. First, this Liberal government bought the softwood lumber agreement, and now they're making things even worse for the forestry industry. Their decree will eliminate 1,400 jobs. And yet the Bloc Québécois seems to want to support this government nonetheless. Why does this government keep hurting the forestry industry, even though it is one of the main economic supports of our regions? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind my colleague that we are working closely with all stakeholders in the forestry industry, workers, businesses, communities, environmental groups, First Nations. We are also working closely with the government of Quebec to find sustainable solutions for a sustainable forestry industry in Quebec.
The Honourable Member from Surrey-Newton.
Mr. Speaker, we have seen a rise in serious crimes targeting Sikh Canadians and the South Asian community, leaving many Canadians feeling anxious and unsafe. Last week, the RCMP confirmed that the agents of Government of India have been involved in these crimes. Can the Minister of Public Safety please explain how the government is taking steps to ensure that all Canadians can feel safe in their communities?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank our colleague from Surrey-Newton for that question. He's right. Last week, the RCMP took the unprecedented step to share with Canadians information about a significant public safety threat. The alleged actions are a grave violation of Canada's sovereignty and the rule of law. We stand with the Sikh community, the South Asian community, in terms of assuring their safety. I want to thank all of those involved in this complex investigation. The RCMP, their partners in provincial and municipal police have done terrific work. Our priority is always the safety of all Canadians, and the RCMP will work with us to continue to assure that.
The Honourable Member from Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, the multi-billion-dollar telecom company Rogers says that their latest price hike is the result of increasing cost of technology. Canadians aren't buying it, but they're paying for it. They were misled, and this is another ploy to get ripped off by Rogers, who just gouged out record profits. Now the Conservatives won't stop Rogers from gouging Canadians. They won't risk losing their maximum donations they receive from the company's owner. And the Liberals keep handing out millions of taxpayer dollars to Rogers, who is gouging those same taxpayers. Why do the Liberals, like the Conservatives, ratchet up corporate greed at the expense of Canadians? Why won't they stand up to Rogers?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
A lot of members here will take lessons from the NDP about standing up for what's right, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we stand up for Canadians. We stood up to Rogers. We said no to their proposed merger, Mr. Speaker. We imposed the harshest condition in our nation history in a telecom, Mr. Speaker. That's right. We're always on the side of consumers, Mr. Speaker. We want more competition in this country, more choice for consumer, and lower price for Canadians. Canadians know we'll always stand up for them, and I think everyone should take a lesson from us in this House, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The Honourable Member from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, last week an IDF missile strike burned Palestinians alive at a hospital tent camp. This escalation of what the University Network for Human Rights has called a genocide only emboldens Hamas and does nothing to return hostages. Canada's focus must be on achieving peace, including a true arms embargo, advocating for Israel to allow humanitarian relief in, and for an end to the occupation of Palestinian territories. When will this government's actions align with their words when they say never again?
The The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Speaker, the situation in Gaza is absolutely catastrophic. Too many innocent children, women, people have died. And so that is why we need the violence to stop. We need a ceasefire that is supported by the UN Security Council, including the US. We need hostages to come back home. Their family needs to be able to see them, to love them. And in the end, we need more humanitarian aid going into Gaza, and this government works on this every single day. Thank you.
Standing on a point of order, the Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
I rise to propose that a standing committee on Canada-India relations be created, and I believe...
Honourable Member, we will get to the those points in just a second.
Damn it, Greg. Do your job properly, Greg. Come on.
Inform the House that the volume of the earpieces will be reset.
I wish to inform the House that the volume of the earpieces will now be reset.
All right, so we're doing something here. I don't know what's going on. We're going to do point of order. Maybe they're going to do a vote. I am curious to see, though, what will happen soon.
I understand he's got a UC. The Honourable... Do I understand that the Honourable Member from Burnaby South has a unanimous consent motion?
I rise to propose that a standing committee on Canada-India relations be created. So if you seek it, you should find unanimous consent for the following motion. That the House recognize, one, that that Canada's Foreign Interference Commission has identified the government of India as a possible foreign interference actor in Canada. Two, an October 2022 CSIS intelligence assessment stated that the government of India proxy agents have provided electoral support to, quote, a number of politicians at all levels of government. Three, on October 14th, 2014, the RCMP commissioner released findings indicating that agents of the government of India were involved in serious criminal activity on Canadian soil, posing an ongoing and significant threat to safety. The House appoints a special committee with a mandate to conduct hearings to examine and review all aspects of Canada government of India relationships, including but not limited to diplomatic, consular, legal, security, public safety, political, and economic relations, provided that A, the committee be composed of 12 members, of which 6 shall be from the government party, 4 shall be from the official opposition, 1 shall be from the Bloc Québécois, and 1 shall be from the New Democratic Party. B, the whips of the recognized parties shall deposit with the clerk of the House the list of their members to serve on the committee within 4 calendar days after the adoption of this motion. C, changes to the membership of the committee shall be effective immediately after notification of the relevant whip by the relevant whip have been filed with the clerk of the House. D, membership substitutions be permitted if required in the manner provided for in the Standing Order 114 sub 2. E, the clerk of the House shall convene an organizational meeting within 1 week after the adoption of this motion. F, the chair of the committee shall be a member of the government party, the first vice chairs shall be members of the official opposition, and the second vice chair shall be a member of the Bloc Québécois, and the third vice chair shall be a member of the New Democratic Party. G, the quorum of the committee be as provided for in Standing Order 118, provided that the chair be authorized to hold meetings to receive evidence and to have that evidence printed when at least 4 members are present, including 1 member of the opposition and 1 member of the government. H, the committee be granted all of the powers of a standing committee as provided in the standing orders, including the power to I, travel, accompanied by the necessary staff inside and outside of Canada. 2, authorized video and audio broadcasting of any or all proceedings. I, the provision of the Standing Order 106 sub 4 shall also extend to the committee. J, the committee shall have the first priority for the use of House resources for committee meetings. And K, any proceeding before the committee in relation to a motion to exercise the committee's power to send for persons, paper, and records shall, if not previously disposed of, be interpreted upon the earlier of the completion of 4 hours of consideration or 1 sitting week after the motion was first moved, and in turn every question necessary for the disposal of the motion shall be put forthwith and successively without further debate or amendment.
Very good.
All those opposed to the honourable member moving the motion will please say nay. All
Uh-oh.
there is I
There's some
regret there is
beef.
no consensus for this motion.
Oh, there you go. All right, Greg, what's going on here? Come on, buddy.
Routine business. Tabling of
He got denied so quickly. Jagmeet just delivered that speech, and within 2 seconds it was done.
4.1 bracket 3 of the Lobbying Act and Standing Order 111.1. I have the honor to table in both official languages the certificate of nomination with biographical notes for the proposed reappointment of Nancy Boulanger.
That was pretty funny. Okay, the routine proceedings, I think I might end it here. Yeah, they're probably just going to talk about the SDTC or whatever still, and they're just going to do nothing about it. All right, everyone. Oh no, they're doing tabling documents. Hold on, let's see what they're doing.
Notes for the proposed reappointment of Carolyn Maynard as Information Commissioner for the term of 7 years. I request that these nominations and biographical notes be referred to the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
introduction of government bills.
All right, yeah, we're just gonna. All right, I'm ending it here. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by today. Another interesting day of question period. I will be live tomorrow. I will be live every day this week for question period. And I believe it's next week as well. So, see you guys tomorrow. Thank you all for joining. If you're new here, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button, and I will see you later.